I'm going to move on to introduce our first speaker, Neil Parish, MP, Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, Select Committee, I should say, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. But more importantly, Neil is a tour de force for the agri-food sector and a great supporter of the Southwest Food Hub. So, Neil, it's time for change. How will the EFRA review fuel those changes?
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. It's good to join you again and with the Southwest Food Hub, because you are doing great work. So my role as sort of chair of the Select Committee is to bring an all-party group together, take evidence on various aspects to do with DEFRA in particular and the environment, and then put a report together, publish it, send it to the government, wait for a government response, and keep gnawing away at the government until they do something, basically. So we're a very strong advocate. We're not ministers, but we are there to try and help. Sometimes we criticize, sometimes hopefully we criticize what I would say in a very positive way, if you can do that. So that is our role very much. So I see that DEFRA is on this morning on the hub, so they're keeping an eye on what I'm about to say. So I have spies in the camp. But seriously, we are, I am delighted with the work you're doing, and because what we did when we looked into the food buying procurement generally, the public sector procurement of food, we found that the government is missing the opportunity to support small businesses and improve animal welfare and promote sustainability with public sector rules for buying food. In our latest public sector procurement report, that's what we've been saying, and of course that's what you are doing as the Southwest Food Hub. Very good work on bringing everybody together. Now, the committee, we also expressed disappointment that the government buying standards have not thus far been used as a vehicle to support British producers. We urge the government to create a greater focus on factors such as seasonality that would support British producers within procurement rules. And then we go on to say that the report recommends the government buying standards for food catering services should be made mandatory across the public sector in England, including schools, local government, who are also currently merely encouraged to comply. GBSF is updated to ensure that public bodies are encouraged to source seasonal produce, therefore supporting British produce. The report expresses disappointment that the government has not used the GBSF as a mechanism to promote buying British within the public sector, as it is norm within public bodies in countries such as France. And I spent some time in the European Parliament, and I can assure you France, Italy, Germany, many of these countries are very, very good at procuring their own food, and quite rightly. The introduction of dynamic purchasing systems, which proved during a pilot run by Bath and North East Somerset Council to be cost effective for the public bodies while supporting small enterprises, should be priorities. Government pilots demonstrating food costs did not increase when buying from local SMEs. And I think this is a really important point, because I think if you talk to a lot of ministers, if you talk to the government generally, they always say, well, yes, it's always very good about having, a public procurement and British food, but it will cost us more. Well, it doesn't, not if it's organized through hubs like you are doing. And so therefore, I think there is so much more we can do. And so I said in my final remarks in the press release that we put out with it, the government has a real opportunity to support high standards, small business and British farmers through its food procurement systems. Our prisons, schools and hospitals spend billions each year on food, yet government buying standards are not up to date and remain poorly enforced. That's what we found through our evidence session, is that they're not really collecting the data data. Our report found that buying British does not have to be more expensive, and at the same time we can support local seasonal produced food, which is often healthier for the consumer at lower food miles and chimes with the government's own net zero and future farming ambitions too. Government buying strategies should therefore be urgently updated, made mandatory across the public sector. If we fail to act, ministers is in danger of paying mere lip service to vital policies and falling short of their manifesto commitments to encourage the public sector to buy British food, support our farmers, and reduce environmental costs at the same time. And so, you can see it does. What you are doing, and public procurement, and linking into SMEs and delivering local produced food and seasonal food, especially in the vegetable sectors, would really be so advantageous across the whole country. We want to see food hubs rolled out across the country. Greg and others we've been to sort of have meetings with Victoria Prentice, where she, bless her, gives us great support, but she has not yet come up with any money. And so my grandfather used to say, an ounce of support is better than a ton of pity, or a ton of mere support without any money. So to not exactly paraphrase what he said. So it's key now to get out there and help you to keep going and roll it out across the country, because that is very much DEFRA and Victoria Prentice's desire. But of course, we have got to keep momentum going in order for you to maintain your position, and also for us to have the money to be able to roll it out across the whole country. So I do understand the urgency of it, and I was talking to Greg and others privately before we started this meeting that I think we will need to go back to Victoria and others to see if some of the reform of agriculture policy, some of the siphoning off of the present payments, some of that money can't necessarily be used to help promote the buying of British food in public procurement. So, Greg, I will pause there, and I'm very happy to answer one or two questions. And I have to leave about 12:30, but I'm going to be kept informed about all your deliberations this afternoon. But don't worry, I'm not going to go on till 12:30. So over to you, Greg.
Thanks, Neil. I suppose just one for me to start with, selfishly, is so there's the EFRA review is complete. There's a number of initiatives that have been stated, or intentions that have been stated. So now followed through, Neil? How do those recommendations sort of take shape, and I suppose ultimately get enforced, or at least evaluated?
Right. Well, what we get after we've sent the report, we've got a response which was sort of it was okay that came back from government, but still want more. And so we will now have a debate in Parliament. So that sort of keeps momentum going. We debate the report, and then we ask some more questions of government. The minister comes to answer the debate, and so all of these things sort of keep pressure on government. What we can't do is sort of rule by decree and this will happen. That's not the way it works. But what you do is you keep going and you keep bringing evidence forward, and we have a sympathetic department and minister, but like I said, we've still failed as yet to get the necessary seed corn money to get the system running. And yet Victoria Prentice really does want this to be rolled out across the country. So that's the sticking point really at the moment.
Thanks, Neil. We've got a question in the chat here. It's from Sarah Williams. It says the local enterprise partnerships have a role and possibly funding to support this. Is there a way that the report can influence their plans?
Yes, there's I can do it sort of directly through to the local enterprise partnerships. I'm also talking very much to Mel Squires, who is, both NFU regional officer, but also is a member of the LEP. And so I said to her there, quite boldly, well, if we used a bit of money that we're siphoning off of basic farm payment, you're not going to immediately object, are you? And she said, no, I'm not going to object. So I'll have to hold her to account on that one, I suspect. But we are talking it's a sort of combination really of things you do officially and the things that you do with the individuals that you know, and I think it's a bit like you all work as your food habit. It's the contact, so it's both basically in Parliament, official business, put it down on Hansard, put it into the record, keep pressure on ministers, and then working as well through other teams that are going on, like yourselves, like the local enterprise partnerships. You're right. The trouble with the local enterprise partners is they're a bit like government. They say, I say you've got plenty of money, but it's actually getting it out of them. And so that's where we are really. But if you want me to apply some thumb screws, not only metaphorically speaking, to the local enterprise partnership, in the southwest in particular, I'll have a go. But I think perhaps across the country, I think it may be a combination in the end. If we could get perhaps the LEPs to cough up half the money, and perhaps DEFRA government in some form, or through the local government as well, to help fund this, then it can happen, because it's not a massive amount of money we're after, but it's just getting it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think just I suppose elaborating on that, Neil, beyond the work that we're doing, the hope is that this initiative, the Future Food Framework, we rolled across the UK after the successful pilot in the southwest. So I suppose the question really, should be perhaps to incorporate the fact that the local enterprise partnerships, and David's going to talk about some of the support a bit later in this event, but should be weaving more agri-food initiatives and support perhaps into the longer term plans, which we look for. I've got another one here, Neil. This is a big question, and that's in the chat box here, is how do we offset the lack of overseas purchasing to the detriment of their economies while supporting our own islands in food infrastructure? A very difficult subject long term.
Yes, I suppose what we've got to look at is if you're providing vegetables that we can grow, then that will be local procurement. If we're looking for bananas or pineapples or whatever, peanuts, that type of thing that's always added to the mix of food, then naturally we will import that. And I think perhaps, some of the issue of importing, we need to import first from the least developed countries. There's a sort of whole issue between what are developing countries and what are, big players like Brazil and others probably in some ways need to be avoided. And so that's where, and then we get into the argument about what has been deforested and what hasn't. So it's a huge issue in itself, but I think we can still have food from developing countries. I think we can target it, but we can still have, a lot of food that we produce ourselves. I think we have to be careful sometimes when importing food too, if we are importing food from countries that are potentially very dry, because we are importing their water as well as their food. I don't want to get into a moral sort of melee, but we've got to be careful that we trade to the countries that trade will do them good and help their economies. Do they actually need that food for themselves? This is some of the arguments. So yeah, but I understand exactly where we're coming from. I think we can balance it out, and I don't think it will be at the detriment. You see, I don't think most of the vegetables and things like that, then probably be all right. Yes, we can import beans from Kenya and things like that, which we do, but I think a lot of the time our vegetables are pretty perishable, so far better really to get them locally. So I think there's a good argument, but I accept we don't want to necessarily stop trade with developing countries.
That's great, Neil. Yeah, I think a responsible which is probably the way forward. So just for now, Neil, thank you very, very much for introducing today's event. If we have further questions before we lose you, we might come back to you because we're going to have to keep to time. Otherwise, as you've said before the event, we'll tackle with those questions and make sure we come back to people. So thanks very much. I'm sure hopefully we'll be able to get you involved in this again, and thanks for your continued support.
And thank you for the work you are doing. And like I said, keep me posted, please, on your deliberations this afternoon.
Thank you. So I'm just going to move on now to introduce myself. So Greg Parsons from the Southwest Food and I'm just going to share with you a few slides if I can do that successfully. So here we go. And yeah, it's just by way within these events to give you an update of as to where we are and what we're intending to do. But I just thought sort of pertinent to today's presentation would be just good to maybe tap into, if my slides, well, now they go too far, I expect, so let's go. So just perhaps tap into some of the outcomes from the EFRA report that Neil referred to, before then moving on to sort of talk about some of the work with our other partners, and then just covering briefly some of our next steps. So just, so these are actually quoted as being sort of some of the in the EFRA report. So in terms of the recommendations, it's clearly recommended, as Neil touched on, that the use of dynamic purchasing systems should be prioritised, and this is the case across other parts of the public sector. And as we've spoken about before, and as there's plenty of insight into on the website, working with Crown Commercial Services, who themselves have prioritised the introduction of a dynamic food procurement system for food, we believe that this will provide the flexibility, the versatility, and the opportunity for SME food and drink producers to get involved. So this is extremely important that it's been recognised within the report that this is the way forward. And you know, by definition, this means that actually there'll be an alternative to these long-term framework contracts that are normally and ordinarily with the public sector extremely significant supply calls that generally, you know, are maybe inaccessible for the SMEs. And obviously what you can do through the system that's being designed is aggregate supply across a broad range of producers to provide not just quantity but quality, and also the different levels of standards that might be required. So critical, very important that that's just touching again, so the government buying standards for food and the catering services are made mandatory across the public sector. Well, I mean, I think this is a huge ask. I think largely because what we've seen over recent years or decades really is there's been more sort of slippage from the initial standards as things have, I suppose, within the public sector, and we've seen, you know, more academy trusts coming in and more private FM providers. It's become far more difficult, or sorry, far more challenging for people to always adhere to the government's buying standards for food, which of course, you know, have sections in there that encourage more purchases from small and medium-sized producers. So I think this is a really big ambition. I think making things better than where we are today is the initial task. But why not, in the long term, if we're going to truly use the public sector to leverage some real value to our agri-food sector in this country, then why not aspire for such a thing to be in place in the future? The government buying standards for food and catering services are updated to ensure that public bodies are encouraged to source local produce and therefore supporting British producers. But I'll touch on in a little while that, you know, the work that DEFRA are doing. For those of you that attended our last event, you'll be aware DEFRA introduced the work that they're doing over the next year to review the government buying standards for food and also the balanced scorecard. It's essential work. You know, what's in place now is out of date. And I'm sure that what will be surfaced is a lot more flexibility, but also, you know, it's not going to be solved in one wave of the wand. This is a term strategy, and whilst there'll be some initial tightening up, I think, you know, over the longer term, we'll see some significant alignment with the overall environmental, climate change objectives, and the need to secure food as well. You know, relevant to the last question of Neil's session, you know, actually plays a role in this, because there's going to be some significant challenges coming the way of agriculture, and if we're not careful, you know, there will be a use it or lose it situation, and we will lose a lot of producers unless they can create a viable future aligned with the future ambitions. So again, a very critical, and DEFRA have got a head start on this, and we'll continue to liaise with them and provide updates. So the government buying standards for food, again, are updated to take into account the latest customer preferences and industry practice on nutrition and climate change. Well, of course, it needs to be aligned. And I think, you know, Phil will cover a little bit later in his review of the NHS food strategy, how there's a very close relationship between nutrition and health, which is critical. But also from the climate change side of things, we've got a new agricultural bill where the pending is a new environmental bill, and within that we've got the environmental land management objective that very much are going to be how future producers are rewarded for their behaviours, which is a massive change from the basic farm payment scheme. So that needs to be brought into how the public sector buy their food. My plea to anyone who's listening involved in this is just that it's done in a responsible and time, and doesn't disregard the fact that post-war farmers were encouraged to farm intensively to make sure we have food to eat. So what I ask, and the relevance to this, is that actually it's done in a responsible time frame, and actually through systems like the Future Food Framework dynamic purchasing platform, we are able to have choice, so the institutions can decide, you know, at what stage they want to tap into higher welfare, be that for animal welfare or environmental welfare. The government buying standards for foods will be updated to remove the exemption which permits deviation from, basically this highlights the fact that there have been cases in public sector procurement where institutions who have been mandated to buy through the standards have deviated, and there was a clause in, or there is currently a clause in, that allows that to happen. And it was a very sensitive part of the review, and unanimously this will be taken out. So that's ensuring that what down is what happens and there's no escape route. So just that was a very brief overview, and we, on the Southwest Food Hub website, we've got the full EFRA report, and again, we're happy to sort of take questions either today if there's time, or in the future, and find the answers if we don't know them already. So just to touch on other work that I'm very much involved in currently. So we're very much working closely with, find my notes, we're with DEFRA to not only manage through the regional pilot, but also to help to inform and encourage collaboration with others as they review buying standards for food and the balanced scorecard, because we think that's critical. They think it's critical. If we're going to shape things for the future, then it needs to be very much aligned with what is going to be asked of the future food consumers and buyers. As we've touched on in every presentation, work very closely with the Crown Commercial Services. Now, Crown Commercial Services are venturing into food. This is a new departure for them. Historically, they've been the government buyers for pretty much everything, but they're determined to enter this new responsibility with technology that is of the day, that is that facilitation of small and medium-sized producers to come together with a larger array of standards, and for purchasing to be more dynamic, i.e. not tied in to multi-year contracts and not restricted to the tier one big suppliers, for whom there will be a place on this as well. Yeah, very much opening up the opportunity to smaller producers as well. And over recent months, what we've seen from CCS is that they have very much beefed up their team, done a fantastic job at responding to the COVID crisis, and much has been asked of them within that. But they have now beefed up their food focus, and working with them, we look forward very much over the next 6 months to getting this project ready and raring to go. And then, of course, the NFU, who have been great friends and allies of ours since the outset, they make up part of our steering board, and they have been successful in securing some funding, linking with some of the local councils, and also with the local enterprise partnerships, to actually undertake a piece of research that will really try and nail down what the supply versus demand across the Southwest is in the food sector, because that's critical. We need a picture of where we are today, so we know what capacity there is. What we always talk about is that with public sector, we can never allow it to be the case that there's not food where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. So very grateful to all the partnerships, and we'll continue working very closely with them. And then just in terms of what's next for us, well, making sure really that the people that we are working with are well informed as to where we are in the region. But really the most significant work going forward is armed with this new impetus from Crown Commercial Services and the objectives of DEFRA and the work that NFU are doing. We want to engage with the producers and with the buyers to make sure that, firstly, being clear enough on what the opportunity is and how they can make the most of that opportunity, whether it's direct or through an intermediary. And from a purchaser's perspective, make sure that we mitigate any fears that they have about joining in with such a new way of thinking. So to really over the ensuing months will be to beef up our connections with those suppliers. Food and allergies obviously are rife in what we do. We're working also closely with the Cabinet Office, who in recent days, I'm sure you've probably seen, have boasted about the amount more business they're doing with SME across the country, unable to specify that down to level of food, but there is definitely, you know, we are in what has been described by the Cabinet Office themselves, a perfect storm of opportunity for change to take place. So that's great for us. We're also working closely with the Social Value Portal and Guy Batt. Let's not forget that when the food is purchased, that's not the end of it. It's the onward effect that buying through shorter supply chains can have on local economies, and on education, and on many other areas, on jobs and such like. And also we're picking up and hoping to do some more work with the AHDB, which will also make sure that we can inform and engage their members. So we're going to be busy, and we'll make sure that we share suitably information as it becomes available. And I was sort of thinking of a suitable analogy to finish my little bit on. So I think it's time. So I was thinking about the stars seem to be aligning, but that seemed a bit soft, really. Being an avid rugby fan, what I thought is actually it seems as if we've really got our British Lions squad together. Yes, it could do with a couple more Exeter Chiefs, I hear you say, but generally we've got a squad together. They're very capable, very fit, and very strong. But we should never underestimate the power of the opposition. You know, and this is. It is going to require people to think differently, and we will face challenges, just as our British Lions will. But I'm sure that with everybody's support, that we can overcome them. So I think that's it from me. I'm just going to stop sharing and see if there's anything I need to answer in the chat, which Ellen is just saying to me that we might do that after Phil. And so I'm going to move on. I'm going to introduce Philip Shelley. Whilst working with the Taunton and Somerset NHS Trust, Phil chaired the independent review of hospital food, which did an excellent job and very practically minded, set out for NHS food going forward. And I'm delighted that he's able to join us today in his new role as actually leading that development of the food strategy for the NHS. So I'd like to hand over to Philip Shelley.
Thank you, Greg, very much. And it's great to join you and the team. And I must say, you know, people need to know that conversations have been happening with Greg and the team in recent weeks, and they've been very constructive, you know, and I believe there's real potential for partnership working. It's been a few weeks since I've been in the new job with NHS E&I. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I hope that we've got great potential to move some of the things forward in the next few months, but certainly over the next few years, to take all of the recommendations forward. So I just want to pick up on a couple of areas that I hope will be of interest to you, and also link into some of the thoughts around EFRA and other areas that we're pushing forward. We know that the call for a root and branch review of food was sold in hospitals has actually helped to widen the scope. So even though it came off of the listeria tragedy for so many people, it's important that we looked at the safety, the nutrition, and the quality of food for patients and staff and visitors in NHS hospitals. So covering probably a wider remit that was originally thought of. The next slide, please. Thank you. So right from the start of the review process, it's been vital to involve those that have a healthcare catering influence. So there's hospital colleagues, there's associations, and also understanding the wider involvement, because that's integral if we are to have the right analysis to shape our way forward. I've always been indebted to those that have opened the doors to either site visits, or they've supported me on the food review panel, as well as those willing to give up their time in order to help us process the decision making. And for me, there's three bits of quality. First of all, there's a desire and a backing, you know, to have a regional and national competition for NHS chef teams of the year. You know, what we must do is agree a time and drive an ambition to make it happen. If you think of NHS chefs, they tend to be back of house. So it's important that we give our colleagues the confidence to participate and develop their front of house attitude. It's also critical that we educate the public. You know, the public have this idea about NHS chefs and NHS food. So we have to open their eyes to allergies, dysphagia, how food can empower recovery. And it's great you've talked about fresh food, good food today. So preparations are well underway, and we're due to launch NHS Chef of the Year competition next Tuesday on the 18th of May. What else about quality? We'll have a national training programme. We need to develop our new and current caterers. If healthcare is to push back the boundaries, we mustn't accept second best. Why should we? Our patients, our staff, our visitors, our public deserve the optimal service. I hope that in the coming weeks, we will launch that opportunity for all trusts across the country to be able to dip into that national training programme. And quality, well, we're working closely now with farmers and trust caterers to develop a stronger bond and believe that the NHS can purchase from their local suppliers and producers. You know, our regions are blessed with dairy, meat and fish, as well as our seasonal fruit and veg. You know, we need to maximise the prospect of the public sector strengthening our supply chain. You know, we need to have that inspiration and the courage to step out of that comfort zone. As part of conversations with trusts and alongside the recommendations, we also need to understand and support the gap analysis linked into the recommendations. And we have produced a chief executive checklist. So that is to help trusts understand what it is to have a whole hospital approach. Being innovative and being brave with your decisions is far easier if you have the support of your board. So this is not a test, but just a chance for trusts to flag up the concerns that they have with board level, risk assess and advise accordingly. We want every trust to make that step. Our primary concern with the recommendations was to have the authority to set up an expert group. So as you can see, recommendation number 8 was vital to the success of going forward. The next slide, please. So the application process for the expert group is complete. Interviews have been taking place and showing incredible potential of the people that we have working throughout healthcare. You know, we've asked anyone within the criteria that have the passion to be included in the process and know they have the support of their manager to apply. We all aspire to develop our services, and the expert group have an enormous task, but a great privilege. As you can see, the group is based on the principle of the power of 3, nursing, dietetic and catering, and they will play a key role to have a clear practical identity. As we know, everyone has their say when it comes to directional change. During and after the review, it has been vital to spend a large proportion of that time listening and absorbing the variance of views. That was the only way I was able to write a report with depth and purpose, because we know one size does not fit all. It's important that we have partnership working and everybody continues to have a voice. So those that aren't able to be in the small expert group will be asked to join the subgroups, and all of these areas will be announced at the end of May so colleagues can plan effectively in their diaries. Next slide, please. So our vision is to drive exemplary in all areas, support those that need direction, and use the whole hospital approach to prove that anything is possible. All of us involved in the service of food understand the key role that we play in our society. The last 12 months in particular has woken the public's awareness of what we do, how we do it, and what we require if we are to drive standards to a level that we can be proud of. I've met a number of managers and caterers in the NHS that are natural innovators. You know, they're already driving change in their hospitals and trusts. And above all, they show fantastic leadership quality. So what needs to be shared and promoted? Well, we need data to drive decision making. We need same-day ordering for patients where possible. That should be the aim. We must understand what our staff require in retail and in 24/7 catering in reality. We've got to move on from the debate about food waste and actually make it happen. Proper management. Strengthen the Power of Three approach across the NHS where possible to ensure we have dynamic collaboration. Leading change in any sector is, of course, going to be stimulating, but sometimes the public sector is described as immovable. So for us, like yourselves now, this is the ultimate challenge. During the review, we saw the site visits having a quality of food, having an openness from their teams. We also saw they need equipment repair and replacement. Overall, what we did see was a consistent pride and loyalty. So having our first group of exemplar trusts will enable us to work closely with colleagues to test, pilot, and discuss choice and options. This will strengthen the core of the review progress, and it will maintain a live picture of the pressures and challenges that face the NHS. We know that major transformation can often cost money, but I believe the biggest shift will be behaviour and culture. The NHS endeavours to provide a solid platform for assurance. What we must do is use that platform as a springboard for change, a change that will make a difference to all of us. It's difficult to quantify success, but I've always believed that for what we can achieve is almost unmeasurable. If we have the appropriate skill mix with suitable investment of time and finance, then our possibilities are outstanding. And the final slide. Our efforts towards the net zero deliverables cover a number of initiatives. For example, seasonal menu planning, meal times matter, food waste management. We've also supported a number of schemes through partnerships. So, for example, the Chef's Academy, Nick Vardis and the supply chain have initiated a tremendous root kitchen concept, bringing to life many plant-based options that can be used initially throughout staff and visitor catering. And although there has been continual pressure, both across clinical and support teams, I believe there's a constructive desire from all colleagues to, first of all, have quality choice in retail areas, even under the COVID restrictions, celebrate success where appropriate, promote quality fresh food, so buy British where possible, link with farmers and producers, as well as understanding each regional strength. Introduce changes in menus to stimulate engagement, using technology to amplify the choice available, as well as identifying allergy and nutritional information. It's time to look in the mirror, work closely with the allies within the hospital setting, listen to advice from the external experts in their field before making important decisions. We've got critical colleagues, and they have been given the channel to share their concerns and ideas to ensure their inclusion. What we have is an alignment of energies to ensure that the National Food Strategy, NHS food standards, and the government buying standards are linked to the hospital food review and the report from EFRA. It isn't commonplace to have this opportunity, but there is a willingness to ensure that we have clarity in our direction of travel. This review is driven from within the NHS, not from the outside. So strong but compassionate leadership with the ability to understand what equipment needs replacing. Is the service food model appropriate, or does it need changing? Our communication with our patients is vital as we use the incentive to drive real change that will affect us all, whether we are procurers, producers, caterers, or those receiving our care. I hope that helps to give you an update.
Thanks, Phil. That's inspirational, and you and I share a deep passion for trying to encourage people to careers in the food sector. And I think the work that you're doing is only going to get people to at least stand up and notice that actually working in the food industry is fantastic. Are you happy to just take a couple of questions from us, Phil, if I can find them in the chat? I think there was one here from Sarah, just to say this has been tried many times, many years, and by many, including Sustain, which with much previous financial investment. Can Philip say why he thinks it's different this time? Well, sorry, but I didn't read it beforehand, Phil. Perhaps I wouldn't have given you that one, but you've got it now.
No, I'm really happy to have that one because it's the right question to ask. And as I shared, I think the inclusion of so many groups of people, including Sustain, Soil Association, and groups I've mentioned in the presentation, we are in this together. This is not the Phil Shelley report. This, and mirroring the Lloyd Grossman and the James Martin, for example. When Prue supported us, she made it very clear that this report needs to be from the NHS and from within the NHS. That's why this is different. We will have an expert group. We have exemplar trusts. We have 14. They will extend to 30 in the next couple of weeks. And it has to be driven by all of us that are either supplying or in the NHS. So there's lots of things that will happen to ensure that we make progress, but we make it together. So we're not being told what to do. We're taking that journey together.
That's great. Thanks. And just pop one more if you like. This I'm going to shorten this one. This is Maddie, but it's how might the NHS measure and create standards of nutrient density in its meals?
That's a really good question, and we're working on the food standards at the moment, which has a whole chapter on that nutritional element, because there is a lot of debate. Generally, we use the BDA Digest, where that is our Bible around our menu planning. But because we have a lot of suppliers that are supplying into the NHS, particularly prepared meals, as well as our CPUs and our hospital settings, there is inconsistency. So we hope that those food standards will drive a consistent message that will help us have that density information. If that person wants to write to me, Greg, I'm happy to link in.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, we know Maddie, so we'll do that, Phil. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we could do a load more questions. Thanks very much. You'll be relieved to know that in rugby analogies, Phil's our number 10. So very pivotal to how we get on. I'll log on and just to introduce David Hynd. David is from the Heart of the Southwest Local Enterprise Partnership, who've been huge supporters of ours since the outset, both in terms of action and in terms of funding. And what David's going to talk to small and medium-sized businesses about today is the help that's out there and the support that's out there for uses and how you can perhaps get ready for this public sector opportunity. So I'm just, without further ado, going to mute myself. Say hi, David. You can unmute, and I'll show your slides.
Excellent. Thanks, and hello, everybody. Yeah, and I should just say, I guess from the outset, I head up the Growth Hub service for the Heart of Southwest LEP. So this is the local enterprise partnership that covers Devon, Somerset, Plymouth, and Torbay. Some of you I know are from outside that area. So there's a network of LEPs, there's a networks of growth hubs. So if you're from West of England or Dorset or somewhere else, there'll be a local LEP and a local growth hub for you. If anyone wants to know, who their local contacts are, then feel free to come through my team, and we'll can point you in the right direction. So the Growth Hub service, we're kind of the business support arm for the local enterprise partnership. So you think the LEP deals with bringing together public-private partnerships. It's about shaping and influencing investments in local areas. It's about working with all of you to weave issues that need to be addressed into strategic plans and funding propositions, the sort of approach that Neil talked about at the start. Where the more Growth Hub part is much more about practical advice and support, and connecting you and your business contacts to grants, advice, workshops, whatever it is that might be out there that can help small businesses to start up, develop and grow. So I have a small team of advisors that speak to people day in, day out. We ask a little bit about your business. We are particularly interested in what you need, what you think you need to move your business forward. And then we'll connect you with whatever funded schemes and support is out there. So there's a lot of free advice at the moment. There's certainly a lot of fact sheets and guidance out there that are very popular. We've got a calendar of events and workshops on our website. And we do a lot of things like grant searches and help people navigate COVID business support and all sorts of things like that. So whatever it is you need to navigate support options, we can help you with that. And actually, when you think about what SMEs need to be able to deliver into the public sector, to deliver to bid and be part of bids for public procurement contracts, you might think, well, actually, does my business have the right skill set? If not, what skills programs can I hook into now to upskill my employees that are going to set them on a journey, to be in the right position for when those procurement opportunities come up, that actually your business is in the right place, your staff are in the right place to take advantage. So if we go to the next slide, please, I think, Greg, that'd be great. So I just highlighted a few sort of schemes and options here. I'm not going to go through them particularly today. Do take a look at our Growth Hub website. If you just type in Growth Hub Devon or Growth Hub Somerset or Heart of Southwest, Heart of SW Growth Hub.co.uk, you can find us. And we've got a whole load of schemes and support and workshops and things listed, and this is just a few. The couple in the middle might be particularly relevant today. There's a skills launchpad that the Heart Southwest LEP coordinates that sets out all the kind of skills programs that are out there at the moment. It's a big flagship area for government, actually getting businesses and workforces future-proofed and actually ready for future opportunities and current opportunities. And there's quite a lot of investment now going into developing employees to make sure we've got the skills we all need moving forward. So we can hook you into skill support. Exporting, of course, is another big area. There's a very good Southwest Export Academy initiative if you're quite new to exporting or